The wind shoved her sideways, hard enough that her knees buckled. Clara Whitlock braced one hand against the frozen post at the edge of the cattle trail, and pulled her shawl tight over her ears. Snow bit at her cheeks like sandpaper. Her left boot had split halfway down the sole, and every step sucked icy slush into her sock. She had 1 mile left, maybe less. If the lights weren't on at the McKenna ranch, she'd have to dig herself into a snowbank, and pray she didn't wake up dead. She kept walking. The bag in her hand wasn't heavy, just soft with wear. Its corners rubbed thin and slick like river stones. Inside was everything she hadn't sold: one spare dress, a letter she hadn't opened, and $3 silver wrapped in handkerchief cotton. That was all, that and a name still on her lips, though she'd promised herself she wouldn't say it again. Harold. She bit down hard and tasted blood. A fence line took shape ahead, blurry and shifting through the snow. The gate stood open. That wasn't right. The biggest ranch in 3 counties didn't leave gates swinging in a storm. She stepped through, boots crunching over a crust of ice already forming. The wind howled, but underneath it she caught something sharper. A hinge creaking, fast and rhythmic, a barn door unlatched, slamming. She saw the house a few seconds later, not like a welcome, but like a wall, 2 stories, timber and stone. Smoke curled from the chimney, which meant fire, which meant someone was home. She hesitated at the base of the porch steps. One hand tightened on the strap of her bag. Inside that house were 3 things: a man she didn't know, 2 children who'd lost their mother, and a warmth she hadn't felt in 2 nights. She could turn back. There was still the general store in town. Though she'd been turned out of there already, her hand wouldn't stop shaking. Not from cold. The front door opened. He filled the doorway like a post driven into earth. No coat, no hat, just a broad-shouldered man in his shirt sleeves, staring down at her through the flurry. "You lost." His voice didn't rise, didn't waver. It landed like a fence post dropped in the dirt. Clara lifted her chin. Storm came up sudden. He studied her, shawl soaked, dress clinging, gloves patched at every finger. Her boots didn't match. He could see it all. "You're the schoolteacher," he said, not asking. She nodded once. "Not anymore." Silas McKenna looked past her at the road disappearing under fresh snow. "You got somewhere to be." The question hit like a slap. Her fingers clenched. "No." He didn't blink. "Come in." She didn't move. "I don't offer twice." Clara stepped forward. Inside was heat. Real heat. The kind that reached inside your bones and shook them. The door closed behind her, and her back flinched instinctively at the sound. To her right, polished floors. A staircase, walls bare except for a small cross above the sitting room mantel. To her left, the sound of spoons and ceramic and small boys arguing. "Boys," he called out. "Gist." They came around the corner slow, not shy, just careful. The older one, Will, maybe 8, had eyes too old for his face. The younger, Jamie, bounced on his heels. Jamie asked. Clara knelt stiffly. Her knees cracked. "Only if I'm invited." Jamie grinned. Will didn't. He was watching her bag. They ate at a square table built for work, not talk. No tablecloth, no centerpiece. Clara kept her eyes low. She noticed things: the way Silas buttered bread with a spoon, the way the boys glanced at each other before speaking. Jamie asked questions. Will stayed silent. After supper, Silas pointed her to the hearth. "Dry off. You'll sleep in the room off the kitchen." She stood. "Mr. McKenna." He looked at her, not soft, not unkind, just looking. "I can leave after the storm," she said. "I don't want." "You got somewhere else to go." Clara looked down. Her sock was bleeding through the split boot. He pointed again. "Sit." She sat. Later, after the boys had been sent to their beds with minimal protest, Clara leaned near the stove and held out her gloves. Her fingers had gone yellow at the tips. She didn't tell him. Silas poured 2 cups of coffee, black, no sugar. He handed her one. "They say the train east ain't running till spring." Clara nodded. "They say the school's closed for good." Another nod. "What are you going to do, Miss Whitlock?" She didn't answer. He leaned back in his chair. The fire cracked. "I've got 2 boys running wild. No housekeeper, no tutor, no one who sews or keeps track of socks or remembers how to cook oatmeal the right way." She waited. "I'm not looking for a wife. I'm looking for help." Someone who won't bolt the minute snow's waist high or one of gets the measles. She stared at him. It's not charity. It's a proposition. She set her cup down, her fingers left a damp ring. Why me? Because you knocked on my door when nobody else would have made it down that road. He stood. His boots thudded heavy on the floorboards. Think on it. You can sleep warm tonight. But in the morning I'll want your answer. Clara picked up her bag and followed him down the hall. The room was small, clean, cold. A single bed. One drawer, no curtains. He didn't linger. When the door closed, she sat on the edge of the mattress and pulled off her boots. Her left sock was red. More blood than she'd thought. She opened her bag, pulled out the handkerchief, wrapped coins, 3 silver dollars. They clinked when she dropped them into her palm. She didn't cry. She wrapped her foot, folded the handkerchief back, and tucked it under her pillow. The wind rattled the window then. Just once, a soft knock, not on her door. Somewhere upstairs, she froze. It didn't come again. She lay down anyway. The blankets smelled faintly of ash and wool. She stared at the ceiling and didn't blink for a long, long time. In the morning, the world outside would be gone under snow. But inside, something was already beginning to shift. This storm's not stopping, and neither are the questions you'll need to answer by morning. Clara didn't sleep much. She lay stiff in the narrow bed, one foot throbbing and bandaged, the storm pressing hard against the window like it wanted in. Sometime in the night, a pipe groaned once. A door creaked upstairs. Slow, then shut fast. When morning came, it didn't arrive gentle. Silas's boots hit the floorboards above just after 5. The house was alive again, clanking iron, the thump of wood against the stove, boys arguing about socks. The smell of bacon crept under her door. Clara dressed in the same clothes, brushed out her hair with fingers, and stepped in the kitchen just as Jamie was tipping the coffee tin too far. "Whoa," she said, catching it before it spilled. Jamie beamed. Will looked up from his seat at the table, wary. Silas didn't turn from the stove. "Boys, get your boots on after you eat. I'll need help checking fence lines." Clara moved toward the counter without asking. She took down plates, laid out bread. Her ankle ached, but she walked steady. Silas poured coffee into a tin mug and set it on the table across from him. "For you." She nodded, sat. The boys watched outside. The snow was still deep, but the wind had eased. Light crept slow across the floorboards. When the boys had gone to get dressed, Silas turned to her. "Well?" Clara didn't speak for a long beat. She ran a thumb around the edge of her mug. "You mean it, what you said last night?" "Every word. Marriage. No expectations." He held her gaze. "I don't need affection. I need a working partner, someone who'll stay." She breathed through her nose. Her fingers tightened. "And the boys? They'll warm to you if you're steady. They don't need another mother. They need order." She flinched. He noticed. "Not saying you wouldn't be one. In time." He added, voice low, "I'm saying I won't force it." Clara looked down at her hands. Her fingernails were clean but split. The coffee tasted like scorched earth. She drank it anyway. "I heard the school's not just closed for winter," she said. "It's done. Territory pulled funding. Won't be another one built here for years. I don't have any place to go. I figured." She glanced toward the hallway where the boys had disappeared. "If I say yes," she said, "it won't be because I want your name. I didn't offer it for that." Her jaw worked. "It'd be because I don't see another way to stay alive through this winter." Silas nodded once, no judgment. She stood, then yes. He didn't move, just said, "I'll ride to town once the pass clears. Talk to Reverend Spence." Clara's mouth went dry. "Soon as that?" 3, maybe 4 days. "Depends how fast the North Road melts." She swallowed. "You already planned this?" "I planned to ask." They both turned as Jamie came skidding into the kitchen, grinning with one mitten half on. "Miss Clara, Papa says I gotta help with fence mending." "You do," Silas said, standing, "and you'll listen while you do it." Clara helped Jamie with his scarf, tucked the tail under his coat collar. The boy grinned. Will came in behind him, silent. He didn't look at her, but his boots were on the wrong feet. "You'll trip," she said gently, kneeling. "Let me fix that." He let her, didn't thank her. Silas watched from the doorway as she straightened. There was something unreadable in his face. Later, after they'd gone, Clara cleaned the kitchen. She didn't ask. She needed to move. The stove hissed and spat. The table was rough, cut oak, the boards uneven. She ran a cloth across it. Then again, in the pantry she took stocky dried beans, lard, sacks of flour, no fresh greens, no vinegar, no yeast. She began a list on the back of an old envelope. There wasn't a place to post it, but the act of making it gave her control. Hours passed. In the afternoon, she took a mop to the front room and found a small wooden top under the settee. A boy's toy. She turned it in her hand, wondering who had carved it, wondering if they still lived here. The front door slammed. Voices. Snow tracked in. She stood in the entry as Silas stomped off his boots. "Fence held," he said. "Some drift build-up near the cattle path. Jake'll bring the dogs round tomorrow." Jamie bounded inside, cheeks pink. "We saw rabbit tracks!" "I thought they were coyote, but Papa said they hop." Clara smiled. "Sounds like school in the snow." Jamie tilted his head. "You gonna teach us?" "If you want." "I do?" "Will doesn't like letters, but I do." Will entered behind him, not speaking. Clara held his gaze. He looked away. That night, she didn't eat with them. She took a plate to the small room off the kitchen and sat alone, not out of pride, because the silence at that table still felt borrowed. She ran her fingers over the window glass. Frost bloomed in feathery patterns. In her bag, the handkerchief still held the 3 silver coins. She unwrapped them and laid them out like a game. 1 coin to buy her passage if trains ever ran again. 1 to rent a room in a place that wouldn't care her dress was patched. 1 to survive a week, maybe 2. She wrapped them again. In the dark, her mind circled the same 2 questions she hadn't let herself ask. 1. Why had the gate been open yesterday? 2. Why had the bedroom above hers creaked twice last night, when she'd been told no one slept there? Outside, an owl called. Then silence. She blew out the lamp. The next morning, the sun came up early and weak. Clara rose with it. She had coffee on the stove before Silas came down. "You don't have to," he began. "I know." They ate in near silence, interrupted only by Jamie's spoon clattering to the floor and Will sighing at him. After breakfast, Silas pulled on his coat. "I'll ride south today." "Check the pass." "You think it's clear?" "Near enough." He looked at her over his shoulder. "If it is, I'll be back tomorrow, with a preacher." Clara set down her cup. He paused at the door. "You got any objections? Now's the time." Her voice came steady. "I said yes. I meant it." He nodded. The door closed behind him. The boys ran upstairs to find mittens. Clara stood in the doorway to the kitchen, watching his figure disappear into the white distance. Her future rode away with him. "You marry me, Miss Whitlock. But you'll never replace her." The preacher arrived at midday. Reverend Spence rode up the long drive with his collar high against the cold, and a look like he didn't much care for being pulled away from his fire. His mare was winded. His coat still carried snow from 3 counties back. Clara opened the door before he knocked. Her dress was pressed. Navy wool with a thin white collar she'd stitched from the hem of an old petticoat. She'd braided her hair tight and pinned it flat. She didn't tremble, but only because she hadn't allowed herself to stop moving since dawn. Silas stood behind her. He didn't speak much, just took the man's coat and offered strong coffee in silence. Mrs. Langley arrived 20 minutes later, boots dragging through fresh snow. The midwife's face was weather, creased and unreadable. She gave Clara a long look before stepping inside. "Well," she said, brushing snow from her shawl, "we'll all freeze to death talking about it. Let's get it done." The parlor had been cleared. The boys had been scrubbed. Clara's hands were red and raw from washing them, dressing them, brushing cowlicks flat with the same fingers that once wrote on blackboards. Reverend Spence opened his Bible and didn't bother to hide his disapproval. He began, "Is a holy institution, not a tool for convenience or shelter." Clara didn't flinch, neither did Silas. The vows were said with the same bluntness as their agreement. Silas didn't smile. Clara didn't cry. There were no rings, no flowers, no promises beyond the ones the Reverend demanded. When Spence pronounced them man and wife, he closed his book with more finality than joy. Then he looked at them both like a man expecting a show. Silas hesitated. Clara nodded once. He kissed her, light, brief, nothing tender about it. Mrs. Langley sniffed. Well, I've seen worse beginnings. From the kitchen, Jamie shouted, "Is it over? Is she our mama now?" The boy tumbled into the room before anyone could stop him. "You said we could have cake after, Papa?" "We will," Clara said softly. "Just let me take your coat off first." She knelt and worked at the buttons. Jamie leaned into her without thinking. Silas watched. Will hovered behind, hands at his sides, jaw clenched. The witnesses stayed for cake, no toast. Just a dry loaf with sugar glaze. Clara had made the night before with what little she could find in the pantry. After they left, the house felt quieter than before. Like the walls had exhaled. Clara washed the plates herself. Silas took the boys outside to chop firewood. No one spoke of what had happened. Late in the afternoon, Silas returned. "I'll show you your room," he said. He led her up the stairs and down the hallway, stopping at a door she hadn't touched since arriving. He opened it without ceremony. The room was soft, feminine. The light came in pale across lace curtains and touched a writing desk in the corner. The quilt on the bed was stitched in blues and yellows. Careful, precise work. Clara stepped in slowly. This was Margaret's, thou? He didn't say more, just crossed his arms and looked past her, out the window. "I thought you might prefer it to the one downstairs," he said. "More privacy." Clara turned in the space. The air didn't smell musty. Someone had kept the room clean. Maybe Silas. Maybe the boys. Maybe no one had touched it at all. She ran her hand along the desk edge. One drawer stuck slightly. "I don't want to disturb anything. The room needs to be lived in," he said. "Margaret's been gone 2 years." He left her then, closed the door behind him. She stood for a long time, listening. No sound but the faint crack of logs downstairs. Clara unpacked slowly. Her clothes looked threadbare against Margaret's gowns still hanging in the wardrobe. The brush on the vanity still had auburn strands tangled in it. She didn't touch it. At supper, the table felt longer somehow. Jamie bounced through his meal with questions about wedding cakes and school books. Will ate in silence. When Clara offered seconds, Will pushed his plate forward without looking up. Later, she found them in the sitting room. Jamie was building a tower from dominoes. Will sat with a book open in his lap. He wasn't reading, just staring. "Do you like stories?" she asked gently. "I can read," he said. "I didn't mean you couldn't." He didn't answer. She knelt beside Jamie. "Want me to show you how to balance 3 at once?" Jamie handed her a domino like it was sacred. They built in silence. When the tower fell, Jamie laughed so loud it startled the dog under the stove. Clara looked up. Will was watching, not curious, not kind, just watching. When bedtime came, she helped Jamie with his nightshirt and buttons. He hugged her without thinking. Will stood outside the bedroom door, arms crossed. "You don't have to like me," Clara said quietly. "But I'm not leaving. You're not my mother." "No," she agreed. He turned and walked into the room. She stood outside until she heard him climb into bed. Back upstairs, she sat at the desk and opened the drawer that stuck. Inside was a folded scrap of ribbon and a page torn from a seed catalog. Margaret's name was written on the back in looping script. She closed the drawer. She didn't sleep right away. Her mind ran loops around questions she didn't dare ask Silas. Why keep Margaret's room exactly as it was? Why let her wear that name, Mrs. McKenna, while another woman's ghost still filled the house? And what would happen if Clara tried to change even a single thing? She finally lay down, pulling the quilt tight across her chest. The moon-cast window, light across the floorboards. A breeze from the hallway slipped under the door. The house was still. And then, not loud, not fast, just a soft creak floorboards near the nursery. Then silence again. She didn't get up. She stayed still under Margaret's quilt, in Margaret's bed, wearing someone else's name. This house was never hers again. But now it's ours. Clara laced her boots slow that morning, careful not to wake the boys. The sun hadn't yet cracked over the ridge, but she was already up, already dressed. Church started at 8. Silas had said they didn't go often, not since Margaret. But the Reverend had done the wedding, and Bitter Creek watched. If they stayed home, tongues would wag louder. She braided her hair twice before settling it flat. The mirror in Margaret's room was clouded at the edges. It didn't show her whole face unless she leaned forward, chin up, she did, and held her own gaze until the moment slipped. Downstairs, Silas was fitting Will's collar. The boy stood stiff, mouth thin, resisting every tug. "Morning," Clara said gently. Silas gave a short nod. "We'll take the wagon." Ground still soft from melt. Jamie came skipping down, mismatched gloves in his teeth. "Do we get pancakes after church?" "No," Will muttered. "Maybe?" Clara offered. "Depends how quick we get back." The ride into Bitter Creek took 40 minutes. The sun came out halfway through, a wheat golden light that made everything sharper. The smoke from distant chimneys, the black silhouettes of cattle against snow, the far-off sound of crows. The church was small, white-washed, with a steeple that leaned a little left. Horses were already tied out front. As they pulled up, Clara could feel the heat of eyes on them. Silas didn't fidget. He never did. He lifted Jamie down from the wagon, then waited while Clara stepped out herself. He offered her a hand. She took it, even though she didn't need help. The gesture wasn't affection. It was theater. But it helped. Inside, the pews were already half full. Reverend Spence stood stiff near the pulpit. Not smiling, Clara spotted Mrs. Langley seated near the aisle, hands clasped, eyes alert. The old woman gave her a small nod. A peace offering, maybe, or a warning. They sat 2 rows from the front. Jamie wedged himself between Clara and Silas. Will took the outer edge. The organ wheezed to life. Hymns were sung. The sermon was dry. Something about obedience and storms, the Lord's timing and man's pride. Clara kept her hands folded, her back straight. After the final amen, the social ritual began. Clara stepped out first, Jamie's hand in hers. The crowd parted like water, but not warm, more watchful than welcoming. "New bride, huh?" Someone muttered behind her. "Didn't waste time. She'll never be Margaret." A voice louder than the rest. "She doesn't look like she can milk a cow, let alone raise 2 boys." Clara turned. The speaker was a tall, lean woman in a slate gray shawl, Ruth Carraway, married to the feed store owner known for never forgetting a slight. Or letting anyone else forget it either, I suppose. Clara said calmly. "We'll all find out." That stopped the woman short. But others moved in, passive smiles and hard eyes. "You planning to keep the same gardening schedule Margaret used? Those boys must be missing her terribly. Such a quick courtship. But I suppose a man's got needs." Clara didn't flinch. Jamie clung to her skirts. Will hovered just behind, silent. Then a boy's voice loud, cutting through the murmurs. "She ain't even really their mama." Clara turned. A lanky boy of about 10. Billy Beckett, nephew to the deputy, stood near the church steps, grinning. Will moved fast. He didn't yell. He didn't warn. He hit the boy square in the chest with both fists, knocking him backward into the snow. The crowd gasped. Billy scrambled up, fists up. But Silas was there in 2 long strides. He grabbed Will by the shoulder, held him back with one hand. "That's enough." Will twisted but didn't pull away. His face was bright red, mouth tight with fury. He was talking about her. Silas looked down at him. No anger, just steady pressure. "I heard." Deputy Beckett crossed the yard, face like thunder. "Your boy just laid out mine, McKenna." "Your boy ran his mouth," Silas replied evenly. "Doesn't justify violence." Silas met his gaze. "You want to talk law? Do it in my barn, not in front of the preacher." Beckett looked past him, right at Clara. "You bring chaos into a house, don't be surprised when the children act wild." Clara didn't answer. She just gathered Jamie closer, her jaw clenched. The deputy led his nephew off. The crowd began to break, like sheep with no fight left. Silas looked down at Will. "You apologize?" "No." The boy said, "I won't." Silas didn't push it, just turned and said, "Let's go." The wagon ride home was silent. Jamie dozed off on Clara's shoulder. Will stared straight ahead, fists still clenched in his lap. Back at the ranch, Clara sent Jamie inside with his boots off and a warning not to drip on the floor. She stopped Will on the porch. "You stood up for me." "I didn't do it for you," he said quickly. She nodded. "Still, I'm grateful." He wouldn't look at her. "I'm not trying to be your mother," she said. He kicked at the step. "I just want this house to be safe. For all of us." He said nothing. Inside, Silas had already stoked the fire. He didn't speak for a long time, then finally to Clara. Town's still watching. I know. They'll be louder next time. I know that, too. He studied her, something flickering just beneath his eyes. Will didn't used to fight. He's not a child anymore, she said quietly. No. Silas agreed. He's not. That night, Clara found herself in the nursery, not cleaning, not snooping, just standing. The cradle was still there, the quilt still draped over it, dusty, but not untouched. She sat in the rocker and traced the edge of the crib with one finger. Jamie came to the doorway in his nightshirt. You gonna sing? She looked up. Did someone used to? Margaret did. When I was little. Do you remember the song? He shook his head. But I remember the way it felt. She nodded, pulled him into her lap. She didn't know the words, so she hummed something soft. Jamie leaned against her, thumb in his mouth. Will watched from the hallway. This time he didn't run. If you can't win them over, Clara, they'll turn the whole town against you. The first time Clara noticed the door to the nursery wasn't fully shut. It was near midnight. She was heading back to her room with a kettle of warm water for her ankle. The only light coming from the dying stove in the hall. The door creaked just an inch, slow, like something had pushed it open from inside. She didn't go in, not that night. But the next morning, when Silas and the boys rode out early to check a fallen fence line, Clara lingered. She finished her chores, sweeping, folding, checking the pantry, then walked upstairs, each step creaking under her. The nursery sat at the end of the hall, a soft square of pale blue walls and untouched stillness. The air felt thinner in there, colder somehow, like the room held its breath. She stepped in slowly. Dust motes floated in the light from the one small window. The cradle was still beneath the far wall, hand-carved, the quilt draped carefully across. There were books stacked neatly on a low shelf, wooden toys in a worn canvas bin, a child's name embroidered on a pillow she'd never seen before, Abigail. The stitching was frayed, faded pink thread. Clara sank onto the small rocker by the window. Her fingers found the curved armrest, the smooth spot where someone had gripped it over and over again. A soft creak came from behind. Will stood at the doorway, barefoot, arms crossed tight. You're not supposed to be in here. Clara stayed seated. Is that so? He hesitated, then stepped inside slow, like he was waiting for something bad to happen. That was Abigail's room, he said. You shouldn't move things. I didn't touch anything. He looked at her hand, which had drifted toward the pillow. Papa never comes in here. I figured. Jamie doesn't remember. But I do. Clara nodded. Tell me about her. Will looked down at the floorboards. His voice got smaller. Margaret went into labor during a storm. Like the one when you showed up. Clara felt her breath catch. She wanted to ride into town, but Papa said no. Said they'd be fine here, that she'd done it before. Will swallowed. She blood. A lot. Abigail never cried. Not once. Just came out still. The boy's hands clenched. His eyes burned, but he didn't cry. I saw them carry her out. Papa wrapped her in a blanket. He didn't talk for days. Clara stood slowly. I'm sorry. She said. He turned away. You don't even know her. No. But I know what it means to carry pain that doesn't leave. We'll look back at her. Do you? Clara opened her mouth, then closed it. She wouldn't lie. I'm learning. That night, she set a bowl of stew at Will's spot at the table. He sat, didn't speak, but took it without hesitation. Jamie chattered about a fox they saw near the south fence. Silas listened, and Clara let the rhythm of the table guide itself. After dinner, Clara found Silas in the barn, checking the latches on the tack boxes. You never told me about her, she said. He didn't look up, didn't see a reason. You said you wanted help. But you left a whole part of this house sealed shut. He closed the box with a soft click. That room is not your concern. It is now. Will's still grieving. Jamie doesn't understand what he lost. Silas turned. His face was blank. Margaret's gone, he said. Abigail never had a chance. I can't change that? No? Clara said. But you could let it be grieved, not buried. He stepped closer. You want honesty? I made the call to keep Margaret here. I thought I was protecting her. The doctor might not have even made it in time. But maybe he would have. Silas's jaw tightened. That's the part you can't undo, Clara said, her voice softer now. That's what's sitting in that nursery. I told you from the start, he said. This wasn't about love. It was survival. Clara nodded, and we're surviving. But what kind of house are we building if everything tender stays locked behind a door? Silas didn't answer, just turned back to his tools. When she left the barn, the wind had picked up again, another storm, maybe the third one this month. In the middle of the night, she woke to a noise downstairs. She rose, wrapped in her shawl, and padded barefoot to the stairs. Jamie was there, sitting by the front door, coat in his lap. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Kneeling, he looked up, blinking sleepy eyes. "I was trying to find her." "Find who?" "Abigail. I had a dream she needed help." Clara's heart ached. She gathered him close. "She's not out there, Jamie. She's somewhere warm now. And safe." He nodded against her shoulder. "I didn't mean to scare you." "You didn't." She carried him back to bed, but she didn't sleep. Morning came gray and biting. Clara lit the stove early. The house creaked and moaned. Silas didn't come down right away. When he did, he looked tired. Older Will came in behind him, holding a small bundle of firewood. Clara moved to start breakfast, then paused. "I think we should open the nursery," she said, without turning around. Silas didn't respond. "I mean really open it. Light the lamp, dust the shelves, let the boys be in there." Silas's silence dragged. Then's, "Why?" "Because it's not a tomb." She turned. "It's part of this house. And if we're ever going to heal, any of us, we need to stop pretending it isn't there." Jamie looked between them, eyes wide. Will set the firewood down without a sound. Clara's hand stayed firm on the counter. Silas looked at his sons, then at her. Then he gave the smallest nod. That afternoon, Clara and the boys opened the windows in the nursery. They folded blankets, dusted the cradle. Will brought in a book. Jamie laid a new quilt at the foot of the rocker. Silas didn't come in, but when they were done, Clara noticed something small had been left on the windowsill, a wooden horse. Hand-carved, polished smooth with use. No one said a word about it that night. Will passed her his plate for seconds. He didn't say please. He didn't have to. Later, Clara sat at the desk in her room. Hands still, she opened the drawer again. The seed catalog page was gone. In its place a pressed flower. Phadalo. She didn't ask. Some things didn't need explanation. Margaret didn't just die in that room. Something else was lost with her, and Silas has never told a soul. The cattle count came up short before noon. Silas had the ledger open on the tack table, his finger running down the column twice, then a third time. He didn't swear. He didn't even frown. He just stood there longer than necessary, eyes fixed on the numbers like they might rearrange themselves if he waited. Clara watched from the doorway of the barn. Jamie's small hand wrapped around her skirt. The air inside smelled sharp. Hay, leather, cold iron. Will was near the stall, brushing one of the horse's two hard strokes, fast and angry. "How many?" Clara asked. Silas closed the ledger. 20. Jamie's eyes widened. "That's a lot." "Yes," Silas said. "It is." He stepped outside without another word. Clara followed, boots crunching over frozen ground. Will trailed behind, still gripping the brush. They walked the north pasture first. The snow was packed in places, drifted high in others. Tracks were everywhere. Hoofprints, churned and overlapping. But something about them made Clara slow her step. Silas crouched near the fence line. The wire wasn't broken. It was cut clean, low, too precise to be weather or a wandering steer. Silas stared at it for a long moment, then stood. "Jake!" he called. One of the ranch hands came jogging up, breath puffing white. He took one look and went still. "Wolves don't do that," Jake said quietly. "No," Silas replied. "They don't." Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. She pulled Jamie closer. "Where would they take them?" Will asked. Silas didn't answer right away. His gaze followed the fence line toward the south, where the land dipped and rose again toward the old rail spur, towered the tracks. He said finally, "If they're smart." Jake spat into the snow. "Rustlers, then." Silas nodded once. They moved fast after that. Jake rode out to check the lower pasture. Silas sent another hand to town. Clara took the boys back to the house, her mind racing ahead of her feet. Inside, she barred the door without being told. "Is Papa mad?" Jamie asked. "No," she said. "He's thinking." She set Jamie to shelling dried beans at the table. and sent Will to bring in more wood. Then she stood at the window, watching the barn, the yard, the road beyond. The sound of hooves came an hour later. Deputy Ira Beckett rode up alone, his hat pulled low, his expression already tight. Clara met him on the porch. "Morning, Mrs. McKenna," he said, eyes flicking past her into the house. "Heard you're missing some cattle." "Yes," she said. "Silas is in the barn. I'll find him." He didn't wait for an invitation. Clara followed at a distance. The barn felt smaller with the deputy inside it, like the air had been taken up by something sharp. Beckett listened as Silas explained. He nodded in all the right places. Then he asked, "Anyone new been through here lately?" Silas didn't look at Clara. "No." Beckett did. "You sure about that?" he asked lightly. Clara met his gaze. "If you're asking about me, deputy, I arrived on foot in a blizzard. I don't own a horse." Beckett's mouth twitched. "Rustlers use all kinds." Silas stepped forward then, not fast, not loud. "That's enough." Beckett raised his hands. "Just doing my job. Do it somewhere else." The deputy held Silas's stare a beat too long, then nodded. "I'll check the rail spur," he said, "but cattle don't vanish on their own. Someone's watching you, McKenna." "Has been for a while." After he left, the barn felt colder. Clara turned to Silas. "He thinks this is our fault. He thinks I'm weak," Silas replied, "or distracted." She didn't argue. That afternoon, Silas pulled rifles down from the rack Clara hadn't known existed. He checked each one with practiced hands, movements quick and economical. "You expect them back?" she asked. "Not all of them." "And if they come again?" He looked at her then, really looked. "Then they'll come at night." Clara's stomach tightened. That evening, she made sure the boys stayed close. Supper was quiet. Will ate fast. Jamie barely touched his food. "Are they going to take our horses too?" Jamie asked. "No," Clara said. "Not if we're careful." Silas pushed his plate away. "I'll be riding out tomorrow. Before dawn. To town. To the South Ridge. See what sign I can find." Clara nodded. She wanted to tell him not to go. She didn't. That night, the wind rose again. Clara lay awake listening to the house settle, to the distant lowing of cattle, fewer than before. At some point, she heard Silas move downstairs. The door opened, closed. She sat up, heart racing, and didn't lie back down until she heard his boots return hours later. Morning came pale and brittle. Silas left before the sun cleared the ridge. Clara watched him ride out, rifle slung across his back, shoulders set. She didn't wave. Inside, she moved the boys' beds closer together. She kept the stove burning hot. She checked the locks twice. By midday, clouds had rolled in again, heavy and low. She was kneading dough when the sound reached her. Hooves, fast and close. She froze. The door rattled, not knocked, tested. "Mrs. McKenna." A voice called, not Beckett's. Rougher. Clara stepped back, her hand closing around the poker by the stove. No one came in. The sound faded. She didn't move for a long time after. When Silas returned at dusk, his face was set hard. "Tracks," he said, "fresh. 3 riders. They circled the house." Clara swallowed. "While you were gone." He nodded. Will's hands balled into fists. Silas rested a hand on his shoulder. "That's why we don't panic. That's why we prepare." Clara looked from father to son, then to the door. The house felt smaller than ever. That night, Silas set a rifle by the hearth. Clara didn't comment. She just made sure the boys slept close outside. Somewhere beyond the fence line, something moved in the dark. If they think I've gone soft, they'll come at night. The snow returned 2 days later, fast and angry. By late afternoon, it was falling thick over the yard, piling high along the porch steps. The wind whistled sharp through the eaves. Silas nailed a second board across the front door. His jaw tight, Clara watched from the parlor. Jamie tucked beside her under a quilt. Will pacing slow circles near the hearth. "They won't come in this," she said quietly. Silas didn't answer. He moved from the front door to the kitchen window, peering out into the white. "They've been testing us," he said. "This is cover." Clara's heart sank. "You think tonight?" "I think it's the best chance they'll get." He crossed to the fire, picked up the rifle leaning by the bricks, and checked it again. "We'll stop pacing. You'll stop them." Silas didn't nod, didn't promise. "We'll try." That word. We. hung in the air. Outside, the sky dimmed early like it couldn't bear to watch what was coming. By supper, the house was shuttered. Lamps trimmed low, every curtain drawn. The cattle had been driven into the lower corral, the horses locked in the inner stable. Clara set a pot of stew on the stove, but no one touched it. Jamie's hands trembled when he reached for a cup. Will sat near the fire, knees to his chest. What do we do if they come? Will asked. Silas knelt in front of him. You listen to Clara. You take Jamie upstairs. You stay down. You don't open a door, no matter what you hear. Will's mouth tightened. He wanted to argue, but he nodded. Jamie spoke up, his voice small. You'll be out there. Silas looked him in the eyes. I'll be where I need to be. Clara found herself standing straighter. The room was thick with waiting. At 9, the wind dropped, not died. Just dropped. Like it was ducking for cover. Silas stood. Now, he said. He slipped out the back with Jake and the older ranch hand Boone, rifles slung low, eyes scanning the dark. They vanished into the trees behind the barn, boots silent in the snow. Clara locked the door behind them. She pushed the dresser in front of it. Then she turned to the boys. You know where to go. Will nodded. Jamie didn't. Clara knelt. We practiced this. His eyes welled. I'm scared. I am too, she said. Then she kissed his forehead and led them up the stairs. The back bedroom, the one with the heavy beams and the low window, had been made into a small bunker. Bedding laid out on the floor, water, a lantern turned down low. The rifle Silas had taught Will to load leaned beside the frame. You stay in here, Clara said. You don't open the door. Will took the rifle and sat cross-legged. His hands were steady. Clara looked at them both. I'll be just outside the door. Jamie reached for her sleeve. Don't go downstairs. I won't. She shut the door behind her. Then she moved to the top of the stairs and waited. The house creaked. Wood shifted. Somewhere, a shutter banged loose and flapped once. Then silence, too much of it. Clara was halfway to the stairs when she heard it. A crunch, not wind, not ice. Boot on snow. Then another. She darted to the front of the house, knelt behind the dresser. The knock came soft. Mr. McKenna. A voice called. No need to stand proud tonight. Clara didn't breathe. You know what we came for. Silas's voice cut through the dark. Then come get it. Gunfire cracked from the trees. 2 shots. Then a scream. More footsteps now, fast around the porch. A boot hit the back door. Once, twice. Clara moved. She lit the stove lamp just enough to see, then took the old pistol from the drawer under the stairs. Margaret's, worn smooth, and crept toward the back. The kitchen window shattered first. A boot kicked the frame in. She raised the pistol, fired once. A man, grunted, swore. She ducked, heart pounding, hearing glass hit the floor. Then silence again, another crash. This time from the barn, shouts, horses screaming. She ran back through the parlor, nearly slipping. Outside, shadows darted through the yard. Then, hoofbeats. Silas, he came out of the trees at a full gallop, firing as he rode. One of the rustlers dropped, disappearing into the snow. Another turned and fled. The one at the barn bolted. But one remained. He stepped onto the porch slow. Shotgun raised. Clara aimed again. The pistol trembled in her hands. Then the front window exploded inward. He came through it in one smooth move. Crashing into the parlor, Clara screamed, fired. The shot went wide. He lunged. They hit the floor together, hard. He was bigger, strong, reeking of sweat and blood. Her hands scrabbled for the pistol. He grabbed her wrist, snarling. Then a crack. The man jerked. A second crack, louder. He fell off her behind him. Will stood in the hallway. Silas's rifle braced to his shoulder, eyes wide but dry. Clara gasped for breath. Will lowered the rifle. Did I? She crawled to him, gripped his arms. You did what you had to. Silas burst in seconds later, snow in his beard, blood on his knuckles. He saw the body, then Will, then Clara, holding both. No one spoke. Later, after the sheriff arrived, after the blood was scrubbed and the windows boarded, Silas stood on the porch. Clara joined him. The snow had stopped. The moon lit everything clean. They'll send more, he said. Maybe, she replied. He turned to her. You held your ground. So did your boy. Silas looked down. He shouldn't have had to, but he did. They stood in silence, then almost too soft to hear. If the law won't protect this place, then I will. Spring came slow to Bitter Creek. The thaw didn't rush. It crept, cautious, Snow shrank from the fence-posts 1 inch at a time. The river, long silent beneath ice, found its voice again, and in the pasture, the first wildflowers blinked open, like they weren't sure it was safe to be seen. Clara stood on the back porch, sleeves rolled, apron dusted with flour, watching the morning settle in. A hawk circled overhead. Inside, Jamie's voice echoed faintly, asking too many questions about breakfast. Will was chopping kindling out back, not because he was told, just because he knew it needed doing. The house had changed. Not suddenly, just a little more each day. The nursery stayed open now. Jamie liked to nap in the rocker when the sun hit just right. Will sat in the corner sometimes, sketching with charcoal he'd taken from the stove box. Silas had built a new latch for the window, and left Margaret's wooden horse on the sill, untouched. No one talked much about that night, but everyone remembered. Deputy Beckett hadn't come back since the sheriff ruled the shooting justified. 2 of the rustlers dead. 1 disappeared, 1 jailed. The ranch stayed whole, the cattle stopped vanishing. Bitter Creek found quieter things to talk about. Clara turned from the yard and went back inside. The stove hissed soft. The air smelled of bread, cinnamon, wood smoke. She set a plate for each of them. No one needed calling. Jamie came running, face smeared with something sticky. Will followed, more measured, though Clara saw the corner of his mouth twitch when Jamie slipped on the rug and pretended it didn't happen. Silas came in last, shaking snow from his coat. Eyes tired but lighter. He sat, said nothing, but passed Clara the butter without asking. Halfway through the meal, Jamie looked up. Can we go into town after chores? I want to show Mrs. Langley the bird I found. Clara glanced at Silas. He gave a small nod. Finish your beans first, she said. Will looked across the table. Can I ride out to the ridge after school tomorrow? I want to check the trail near the riverbank. You going alone? Silas asked. Will shook his head. Jake said he'd come. Another nod. The boys returned to their food. Clara poured coffee into Silas's cup. Her hand brushed his as she set the pot down. He looked at her. You still thinking of leaving? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Just watched the boys, the steam from the mugs, the way the house held them all like a second skin. No, she said. I think I'm already here. Silas looked at her a long time, not soft but real, and something in his face shifted. Just slightly. You kept your word, he said. Clara folded her hands in her lap. So did you. After breakfast, the boys burst outside, boots thudding, laughter trailing behind. Clara stepped to the doorway, watching them vanish around the barn. Will's handwriting steadier, she said. Silas came to stand beside her. He's steadier. I think Jamie's ready to start reading on his own. He trusts you. They stood together for a moment, quiet. I don't pretend this was fair, Clara said finally, to any of us. The way it began. No, Silas agreed, but we built something anyway. He turned to her. And I reckon things that survive storms tend to hold. Clara felt something rise in her chest. Tender, slow, not sharp like before. You still want just survival? She asked. Silas's eyes didn't flinch, not anymore. She took his hand. Outside, the thaw continued, and inside that house, quiet, battered, standing still, was something harder to name than family, but deeper than agreement. It wasn't a love story like in books. It wasn't perfect, but it was earned, and in this part of the world, that was the truest kind there was. Because healing doesn't come like thunder. It comes like spring, slowly, stubbornly, and only after you've lived through the cold,